Government budget is a number of funds set by government in the beginning of the period to the free budget of funds outlined for a period. Government budget covering current expenditures, capital expenditures, and transfer payment.
Now, we will talking about any problems that comes up when government want to measuring their budget deficit. The first problem is inflation. Almost all economists say that the government's indebtedness should be measured in real terms, not in nominal terms, because they do not believe that fiscal policy is the right indicator in measurement. It is a problem because the results of measurement without inflation and the results with inflation are very much different. The second problem is capital assets. When measuring government debt as a whole, we must reduce government assets from government debt. Therefore, the budget deficit should be measured as the change in debt minus the change in assets. The problem is, when measuring a budget deficit and not including government assets, it's just the same as assuming that those assets are government spending, even though they aren't. Next is uncounted liabilities. The government itself have some important liabilities like social security system, pension plan, and etc. When measuring the budget deficit, this indicator become a problem too, because many economists said that the liabilities not included to government's debt, and the government in principle can choose not to pay these debts. And the last is business cycle. Many changes in the government budget deficit occur automatically in response to a fluctuating economy. That is, the deficit can go up or down, either because the government has changed policy or because the economy has changed direction. To solve the problem, the government calculates a cyclically adjusted budget deficit.
The traditional perspective is about government's debt, which goes straight to the conclusion that is why, in a short period, when the price on each product was insanely stuck, so that it shows that tax cuts stimulate consumers' expenditure, which implies an expensive shift in the IS curve. The first point, the traditional perspective itself, divided into two broad subfields. The first one is microeconomics and the second one is macroeconomics. The second point, if there is no change in the monetary policy, the shift in the IS curve leads to the expansion shift in the aggregate demand curve. The third point, over time, when prices adjust, the economy returns to natural levels higher output and aggregate demand results in higher prices. By contrast, most economies support free international trade. Their view about free trade as a way on allocating production efficiently and raising living standards both at home and also on abroad. Although the overall effect of tax cuts on traditional economic welfare is considered very difficult to assess.
Guardian equivalents state that government budget deficit caused by tax cut don't have an influence on the country aggregate consumption level. Instead of increasing consumption, the additional income received by the public from the tax cut is saved, thereby increasing the amount of private saving. This is due to Dave Ricardo's view, which assumes that society is a rational individual, thinks far ahead, and cares for the welfare of future generations.
Other perspective of government debt. There are three reasons why optimal fiscal policy may at times call for budget deficit or surplus. Number one is for stabilization. When the economy goes into recession, taxes automatically fall and transfer automatically rise. Although these automatic responses help stabilize the economy, they push the budget into deficit. Number two is tax smoothing. A budget deficit or surplus can be used to reduce the distortion of incentive caused by the tax system. As we knew before, high tax rates impose a cost on society by discouraging economic activity. A tax on labor earnings, for instance, reduces the incentive that people have to work long hours. Number 3. Intergenerational redistribution. A budget deficit can be used to shift a tax burden from the current to the next generation. For example, some economists argue that if the current generation fights a war to preserve freedom,